Welcome, everyone, back to the Multithread Income Podcast. I'm joined today by my guest, Steve Cleary. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing well.
And we are at Codemash in Ohio, another episode here. Steve, you've been to Codemash a couple times before, haven't you?
I have, although it has been many years since I've been here.
Many years?
Pre-pandemic.
What were you speaking on at Codemash?
So I had two talks lined up. There was Async and Await from the ground up, which is an intro, little intermediate reintroduction to Async and Await in C#. And then I had a talk a little while ago on the Async Masterclass, which is really advanced Async and Await. And then I had a third talk, which is last minute because they had several cancellations on Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
So I'm also giving a talk later today on protocol design, which is something I just find interesting.
Good times. Well, that sounds fascinating. I might have to step in for that. That sounds good. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to actually talk more about you, not the talks you've been doing. So Steve, just kind of tell us, what are you doing now?
Okay, so I live in northern Michigan, and I work for a company in the Pacific time zone in Washington State. The company is called Logos, and they actually write some of the best Bible software in the world.
Okay.
So a lot of pastors use it. We're trying to get more laymen to use it, but right now it's focused on pastors, academics, people who like study the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then need to dive into the original Hebrew and Greek. Usually end up using our software because it's the best in class for that.
And that's not the Bible app that I see a lot of people using, or is it something different?
No, so
much
like
deeper.
Yes,
Okay.
Ours is much more about deep study in the Bible, although we're trying to make it more user-friendly so that it can be used for more casual Bible usage. So we've got mobile apps, web app, and the desktop app. I've been on the desktop app for the last year on that team. Previously, I was mostly on backend services, which are almost entirely .NET.
Mm-hmm.
So mostly .NET Stack. Our desktop app is also .NET WPF. And then we share a lot of that code with the Mac as well. So both Mac and Windows share most of their code.
Oh, that's fun. So you get a breadth of technology and platforms and.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, that is cool to hear. I'll have to check that out. You also, we were talking a little bit earlier, you have a book you've published with O'Reilly.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So it's got a really annoyingly long name. It's Concurrency in C# Cookbook, Asynchronous, Parallel, and Multithreaded Development or something like that.
Second edition?
Yeah, second edition, actually. There is a second edition, yes.
So O'Reilly, is that they the ones with the animals on the front?
Yes.
All right. What animal do you have on the front of your book?
I forget what it's called.
Okay.
But it's kind of infamous because people make coffee from its poop.
Oh, okay.
Like they feed it coffee beans.
Yeah.
And it poops out the coffee beans, and then they make coffee from that. And I'm like, I would never do that. I would never drink that. But apparently it's some super exclusive, expensive coffee.
I feel like it's this sort of thing. You drink the coffee first, and then someone tells you afterwards, hey, by the way, great story about where these beans came from.
I don't know who had that idea first, right? Man, I'm really hungry. Oh, this looks good.
It's like they invented coffee. Someone had to get to that point where they found the beans and they roasted the beans and then they drank the beans. It's just a natural progression of ew. So you have a book with a very long title, Through O'Reilly.
Yes.
Now, we've talked to a couple other book publishers, but I like hearing everyone's individual story. Were you approached to do the topic, or did you approach O'Reilly to do the topic?
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. So I shopped the idea around. I wanted to write a book on Async and Await, essentially, which was still a very new technology at the time. And at the time, no other books really covered it. If you were to pick up a copy of C# in a Nutshell or whatever, at that time did not actually cover Async and Await. So it wasn't really covered very well in the book world. And I figured I could write a small book on Async and Await. And so I asked Microsoft if they would be interested. To me, that seemed like the natural publisher for a book on a technology that they designed. And they said no. And so I asked a few other publishers. They all said no. And O'Reilly said, yeah, that sounds good. So that's how that got started.
Did you have any sort of pre-existing relationship with someone at O'Reilly, or was that a
No.
cold email? I have an idea.
No, if I recall correctly, they had like some kind of a web form or something that I filled out.
Okay.
Something like that. It's probably a completely different process these days.
So you managed to ship an idea to them. Talk a little bit about the process. What was the next step for setting up the outline?
Yeah.
What you want to talk about?
Yeah. So I think, if I recall correctly, most of the publishers that I submitted to actually required an outline before they would even look at it.
Okay.
So you had to have the idea, title, convincing them that you could do it. You were the one to write the book. And also a pretty fleshed out, not just chapter titles, but also like, here's what I'm planning to do in each chapter, kind of outline for the book.
Yeah.
Before you could even submit it. So yeah, I had that all set up. Now that all ended up changing. So once I agreed to do the book through O'Reilly, mainly because they were the only ones who said yes, then I had a publisher assigned to me, or an editor. I guess, yeah, the editor would be assigned to me. And they, and the first thing that they did was they said, okay, here's our market research. Like we have to change the title to include multithreading. And I said, well, the book isn't really about multithreading, it's about asynchronous and parallel, sure. But I don't really talk about multithreading specifically. And they said, well, this is what people search for. They have that kind of data. This is what people are looking for. These are the terms that they're looking for when they want to hit your book. So they helped me adjust the title. They really changed what went in the book a lot. I was thinking just a book about async and await, something. I didn't want to publish my blog, right? I'd read books that are, I just took my blog posts and reformatted them into a book.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that. I wanted to write a book, a proper book. And so I was planning to write about, but I was still planning to write about async and await. It would essentially be the same topic as my existing blog. But they really encouraged me to also add in parallel programming, reactive programming, TPL data flow ended up coming in the second edition, system threading channels. So it brought in a lot of these other technologies that I wasn't planning to include. I was planning to go much deeper in a single topic. And the publisher helped me reshape, or the editor helped me reshape that into not going as deep, but across a much broader variety of topics. And that, I think, has really helped the book sell a lot better.
Yeah.
So they know how to sell books. That's a business. That's publishers.
Yes.
So they were really helpful in reshaping the book so that it would sell more.
I think that's good advice for anyone that might be looking at going through a publisher for a book, is that you just said they're really good at knowing what sells.
Yes.
So while you might have a good initial idea, they can take your initial idea, run with it, and create a much better idea. And it sounds like you're pretty convinced it's a much better book because of the changes they wanted to make.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I think that the book has been, has shown that approach was a good idea.
Yeah.
I do get asked a lot, hey, I want a deeper book on async and await. There are some people who want that. But I think that that looking at developers as a very broad base, I think that was the right decision for that book. Yes.
Yeah. How long was the timeline from the moment you got it sold to, I guess, when it hit bookshelves?
Yeah, good question. I want to say a year or so, maybe a little more.
How often, I understand you have checkpoints kind of along the way,
yes,
certain chapters. How long did you usually have between, say, a chapter being due or a set of chapters being due?
Yeah, it was usually a month.
Okay.
So, you'd have this month, you want this chapter, these couple chapters completed by then. And it wasn't super strict, but they do, being a publisher, they do have all their marketing and everything like that is all lined up behind that. So those deadlines, you can't slip on them a whole lot.
Were you working on multiple chapters at one time, or was it pretty synchronous through one chapter to the next chapter? I didn't mean to do that, but I'm going to go with that. Yeah.
Yes, it was. It was mostly one then the next. Every once in a while, I'd say, well, I want to do this chapter, next or whatever, and That's fine.
Gotcha.
Trying to remember, I don't think I ever wrote like 2 chapters at once. It was mostly one at a time. Although I would go back and edit as necessary. Also,
I was thinking like with you have editing and tech editing. Were
Yes.
those happening in parallel with writing the new chapters?
Yes, they would.
Okay.
So the way that my book was published through them, they provided their own copy editors. So anything like grammar, punctuation, that kind of stuff, they took care of.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
And I mean, they wouldn't do it for me, but they'd say,
Oh, they would tell you.
"Oh, you should do this. You should use the Oxford comma. Oh, wait, you shouldn't use the Oxford comma." I am pro Oxford comma.
Yeah.
I don't know about your listeners.
I feel like
but-
this table might be pro Oxford.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We're in good company then. All right. So they had their own copy editors who would provide that kind of feedback, and then or like tone.
Yeah.
Like mine was a cookbook. So O'Reilly has a line of cookbooks that they want a specific tone in,
Okay.
and they want a specific structure to all of the chapters.
Okay.
So each chapter has certain recipes in it, and I was able to bend that a little bit because my chapter 1 is like an intro. It's more prose. It doesn't have any recipes.
Okay.
But as a general rule, they have their own voice that they want coming through also. So they have copy editors who help with all that. And then as far as technical editors go, they essentially asked me as, the subject domain expert to provide my own recommendations. And then they reached out to them as technical reviewers.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some great technical reviewers on the first edition. Very happy to have them. And Stephen Tobe was one who like invented Async. So you couldn't have a better technical reviewer for your book. So I'm very happy that he did that. So O'Reilly handled all of that interaction. And then as I would write additional chapters, I would get feedback from each one of the reviewers. I think I had 3 technical reviewers and then 2 or 3 different copy editors in the first edition. That were all providing feedback on the chapters I had already written while I'm writing the other chapters.
No, we don't need to talk about numbers or anything. Did you do any sort of upfront and then royalties, or was it all royalties on the book?
So it was all royalties. This was my first book.
Yeah.
So I was an unknown author. And do you not want to get into numbers?
If you're comfortable talking numbers,
I'm totally comfortable talking.
Let's talk numbers then.
So,
yeah.
Okay. So if I recall correctly, it's 10% is their royalty rate.
Okay.
And it's important to note that that's 10% of the publisher's income, which is not what the book sells for. So in the book production process, usually the end of the last people who actually sell the book to you mark it up by 100%.
Okay.
So the bookstores, Amazon, they get it at half of what they sold it to you for.
Okay.
And then that half is then spent. A lot of it's spent on things like, the publisher's marketing budget and stuff like that, and all kinds of shipping it out, printing it. Of course, these are all print on demand books these days.
Okay.
So there's no warehouse costs anymore, but you do have higher printing costs than you do with offset printing. So you end up with like 10% of that smaller amount after all those other things are taken out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like my book sells usually for about $30, I think, is the average price. At least the first edition was. I haven't really looked at the numbers for the second one, but the first edition would sell for like $30, and I would make, $1.50, $1.85, something on each copy. So you're not going to get rich doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
But you hope you sell a couple thousand copies and maybe close to, millions of copies, maybe, depending on the book.
Right. So the thing is with technical
Yeah.
books, you're not Harry Potter, you're not Stephen King. These are the books that actually make money.
Yeah.
Most books lose money in the publishing world, including a lot of technical books. And so they have to be, So you as an author usually do not make money with a technical book because your target market is not everyone in the world.
Yeah.
It's the developers, which is a small segment of that. And then, C# developers, which is a segment of that. And C# developers who need to know async and parallel programming is a subset of that. So you have a very small target market just to begin with.
It also seems your book is not for the 100 level .NET developer. It's more the 2, 3, maybe 400 level.
I tried to make it as
You try to make it as
approachable
accessible
as possible.
Well, I mean, just the title alone kind of seems like, oh, this is
Yes,
for a
it sounds
higher
complex.
level.
Yes, that's true.
So you have a second edition.
Yes.
Can you talk about the process of, did they come to you to do the second edition, or was that your idea as well?
So actually, they did reach out to me. I think that they had enough people reach out to them, and I had actually come to the same conclusion. I was going to reach out to them. I just hadn't done it yet. But I had enough people, ask me about a second edition, and there had been enough changes in the async and await support with things like system threading channels being added and things like that. And asynchronous streams was something else that was new that I wanted to cover, in that book. It made sense to have that in the book. So I believe they reached out to me first. But I was like, yeah, I've actually been thinking the same exact thing. Let's do this. And so we did a second edition, which was fairly painless.
It's not a complete rewrite.
Right.
Is
no,
it?
not
It's
at all.
let's start with what we have and let's add this chapter. Let's change to these chapters.
Yep. Yeah, I simplified some of the code, just making it more modern C#. So I went through all the code samples. I ripped out in the first edition, there's like these charts of here's all the different .NET languages, not languages, but like all the different versions and different runtimes and how you get like data flow into each one of these different things. Well, you have to use this version of the NuGet package for this old .NET 4 runtime. So I just kind of like ripped all that stuff out and moved it to an appendix because I didn't want it clogging up each chapter. Since by that time it was clear pretty much everybody's moving to .NET Core or will be very shortly. So none of that matters anymore.
Yeah.
Which is really nice.
They say you don't write the book for the money. Can you talk about, were there any other positive effects of having the book?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I guess you could say it's in my blood. I have a lot of relatives who are teachers.
Okay.
Including my mother, who was a public school teacher for many, many years. And I've got aunts and a cousin who's actually a professor of I can't say it.
Okay.
It's a study of how diseases spread. Okay. So like that's what he does. He's a professor who teaches how to learn that. He wrote some fascinating things during COVID. But anyway, so I've got teaching in my blood, and so I've always enjoyed going to conferences and speaking. Well, I haven't enjoyed speaking. That was something I had to learn how to do. Yeah. But I've always enjoyed writing blogs, answering questions online. That's just something I enjoy doing. And so I think that for me, writing a book is kind of an outgrowth of that, of like, I can write a book. If I can write a book that can teach people, that will make me happy as well. And it has had an effect of, I think, getting my name out there more too. So my blog is already pretty popular, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think the book has definitely added to that. There's something to say, well, I'm an O'Reilly author. There's something to that. It's like saying, well, I made a course on Pluralsight or something. Back when
you're part of a club.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's been, I can't like point to anything specific and say, yeah, this happened because of that. But I get the sense that that it has helped my name, my personal brand, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not good at developing a personal brand or anything like that, but I think it has helped with that.
What's next? Do you want to do another book? You want to do courses? Anything like that?
I have been thinking of another book. I keep starting it and then stopping it because it's too much. I want to go like all the way super deep into async and await, more like the book I was originally going to write.
Yeah.
But that's even a tighter target market. So I was thinking about self-publishing that one. One thing that I loved about O'Reilly was their publishing process. So they had it all set up. They've got a Git repository, right? So you're syncing your text back and forth. It's a markdown kind of language, so it's not difficult to write in. It's very close to plain text, and but you can drop down into the advanced stuff if you want. And then they've got this like CI/CD pipeline, so you push it to you sync up to their GitHub repo, and they have a PDF ready for you to download in a few minutes with all the proper styling and everything. And this is exactly like print specific, exactly how your book will print.
Yeah.
Kind of output, and super convenient. So I've kind of like started, playing around with building a pipeline like that on my own. It's a lot of work.
I'm sure.
I've gotten distracted from doing that instead of writing my book. But I've also thought about doing maybe a video series. I've got some videos up on YouTube, but I don't really cultivate that. They're not professionally done at all.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about doing like a professional course on something like Udemy.
I'm a Udemy author. I would
Okay.
highly say, go do something on Udemy. There's definitely a market there for some higher level stuff. Yeah, especially Async Awake. Like so many developers just have so much confusion going into that stuff.
Yes.
I would recommend
It is
you
confusing.
do it. Yeah. I would recommend Udemy, and we don't have to do it on camera, but I can tell you about my experiences with Udemy and potentially what you could be looking forward to. Let's talk a little about the life work balance and writing the book.
Okay.
So I don't know.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So the writing book takes a little bit of time. I don't know family situation, if you have a spouse, kids, or anything like that.
Yes. So I have a wife and 3 kids. Our youngest was pretty young when I wrote the book. I think, was she born? Uh-oh. Maybe she wasn't. Anyway, I had 2 or 3 kids when I wrote the book.
You had more than 1 kid,
Yes.
more than 0 kids.
Yes.
Yep.
So it was a huge time commitment, like massive. Like it took literally, I remember how many years of royalties, like 5 or 6 years later, I was like, I think I might have made minimum wage at this point.
Yeah.
Like it was literally that much time. So it was like evenings and weekends, just all the time all of my spare time, try to write a little bit every day, but it was a lot of time. And when I was done, my wife said, you cannot write another book. So I think I've kind of softened her up. I've been softening her up a little bit over the last few months. I'm thinking about writing another book. And I kept feeling her out, and she's okay with it at this point. But yes, at the end of that first book, she said, yeah, please do that again.
Yeah. Take a break. Don't jump
Yes,
into a new one.
Exactly. Yes.
And courses aren't that much different.
Okay.
It's been the same amount of time, if not more time, because you'll do a take and then have to do another take and then another take. It takes a little bit of practice to get into the flow where you can just record one video right after the other without, minor editing. I appreciate you chatting with me about it. And
yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. So hopefully everyone out there, if you're not inspired to write a book, you are now.
Or disincentive.
Yeah. But Steve, thank you so much for hanging out with me. And everyone else, we'll see you on the next episode of the Multithreaded Income Podcast. You've been listening to the Multithreaded Income Podcast. I really hope that this podcast has been useful for you. If it has, please take a moment to leave a review wherever you get your podcast from. And don't forget, the conversation doesn't stop here. Join us on our Discord at mti.to/Discord. I've been your host, Kevin Griffin, and we'll see you next week. Cha-ching!